Hello, and welcome to A Spoonful of Species, your go-to place for conservation through baking. My name is Caitlin, and I'm an interpretive naturalist with years of experience educating the public about animals, both aquatic and terrestrial. I'm also an avid baker, so each week we will bake an animal-themed dessert and then discuss the conservation initiatives for that animal and how you can help right from home. You may also learn some fun facts that you didn't know before. This week, we are making Seastar Poptarts. Now, before we get started, I would like to point out that you can call them sea stars or starfish. No, they are not actual fish, but I think that with the degree in marine biology, I have enough authority that I can say no one cares. So call them starfish if you want, as long as you know that they are not actual fish, you're doing your part. Sea stars or starfish are, like I mentioned, not actually fish, but are invertebrates that are shaped like stars, and they're from the phylum Echinodermata. And before you start freaking out that I'm getting too sciencey, don't worry, echinoderms just means spiny skin. And so they're actually related to animals like sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and even sand dollars. And all these animals we might talk about later, but today we're obviously focusing on those wonderful sea stars. All sea stars do share some common traits. Some sea stars are really big. There is a sunflower sea star that can reach well over 3 feet long, and there are some sea stars that are teeny tiny, less than half an inch in length. But no matter their size, they all have that central disc right in the center with their mouth on the bottom. They all have 5-part symmetry, so even if they have more than 5 arms, sometimes they can have up to 26 arms, like that sunflower sea star I just mentioned. But no matter how many arms they have, it's usually in sets of 5, and they have really rough skin. Sometimes starfish can have venomous skin, so you don't want to touch it, and sometimes their skin can just be really smooth and not be as rough and be more scaly than bumpy. And they all have tube feet, which are really, really cool. Tube feet are hollow tubes with a suction cup at the end. And every starfish has a different number of tube feet, but there are always a lot of them. And they use these tube feet to crawl up and over their ocean habitats, to find their prey, and to pry open their favorite food, which are mussels. So they are very strong, surprisingly, and for being hollow with a suction cup on top. And there also can be many different colors, which is also very cool. Some sea stars just have a couple hundred tube feet, but most sea stars have thousands of tube feet underneath each of their arms. The sunflower sea star, which is the biggest sea star, reaching over 3 feet in length, can have literally 26 to 30,000 tube feet easily. So I'm really glad that we only have 2 feet, but they have tube feet. To make your Seastar Poptarts, you will need 2 cups of flour, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 16 tablespoons of cold butter, 1 large egg, 2 tablespoons of milk, and whatever kind of filling you want. I used a strawberry preserve. To make your Pop-Tart dough, whisk your flour, sugar, and salt together. Next, work in the butter in chunks until a stiff dough forms. Mix together your egg and milk in a separate bowl, and then add that slowly to your dough mixture. Once the dough is just slightly sticky and is coming off the sides of your mixing bowl, you can roll out and cut out your sea star shapes and then refrigerate for 30 minutes to an hour. I would roll out my dough to about 1/4 to 1/8 inch thickness, depending on how you like your Pop-Tarts. When finished refrigerating, place jam on one of the cutout shapes and put another layer of the dough on top. Pinch the edges together completely. This is the most important part. You don't want to lose all of your jam when it's cooking. Then cut out a little bit of the top of your dough, or you can even just use a fork to kind of poke some holes to let out the steam so that your dough doesn't puff up in the oven. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for 30 to 35 minutes. After your Pop-Tarts are out of the oven, let cool and ice when completely cool. Seastars are considered keystone species, which is just a fancy way of saying that they're extremely important in their food web. So in the food chain, where they sit means that some things eat them, and they help prevent other things from kind of blooming out of proportion. For example, sea urchins. There are some sea stars that eat the urchins and help prevent the urchins from becoming too many. While sea stars use those tube feet to pry open their food and eat the insides, they don't eat the same way that we do. In fact, the way that they eat is one of the coolest things that I know about. Sea stars will go on top of their food, exude their stomach outside of their body like this weird plastic sack, wrap it around their prey, consume their prey on the outside of their body by excreting these digestive juices that break down whatever they're eating. Then they will expel the waste and then stuff their stomachs back into their bodies when they're finished. Now, that would make a very awkward Thanksgiving dinner for all of us, so I'm glad that we don't do it, but it is really awesome that sea stars do. Many of you may already know that sea stars, if you were to cut off an arm, can regenerate those body parts for themselves. But what you may not know is that if that arm is cut off and a part of the central disc is still attached, that arm might grow an entirely new sea star, which is fascinating and awesome. To make your icing, you will need half a cup of powdered sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, less than half a cup of milk, and whatever food coloring and toppings you desire. To make your icing, mix your powdered sugar, vanilla, and milk together and beat until it is smooth. If you don't like the consistency of your icing, you can add more powdered sugar to make it thicker or more milk to make it thinner. Once you get the consistency that you like, add your food coloring and mix, and then you're ready to pipe it onto your cool Pop-Tarts. Despite their resilience and overall badassery, sea stars are threatened by things like global climate change. They are invertebrates, and that makes them a little delicate and kind of not very resistant to temperature changes, salinity changes, or anything like that in their environment. This also makes them really not resilient to pollutants. So anything terrible that gets in the water that's bad for them might also harm them. And sea stars are also being affected by this mysterious disease called Seastar wasting syndrome, and it is gnarly. If you haven't heard of it, Seastar wasting syndrome starts with a sea star becoming infected, and then slowly their body parts just kind of disintegrate until they're melded basically into nothing and they die. And this is happening not just here, but all over the world. But it is happening in a large amounts on the Pacific coast where I am right now. And this wasting disease is a really big problem because it's affecting all kinds of sea stars, but especially the sunflower sea star, which I have mentioned a couple of times already. The sunflower sea star is the largest and is very popular, not only for divers, but in aquaria as well. And so a lot of research is being done into why this is happening, which we still don't know, and what can be done to prevent it in the future. Some places, like the Nature Conservancy, is partnering with different universities to study and breed these sunflower sea stars in captivity. And hopefully this would be able to put these animals back out into the wild, or at least be able to understand better what's happening to them when they contract this disease. So if you would like to help, you can go to Nature Conservancy and check out their online profile for the sea stars and the sunflower sea star and see how you can get involved. And if nothing else, you can donate or just talk to people about sea stars, because the more people know and love sea stars, the more they're going to be willing to protect them. You can also help sea stars by refusing plastic and reusing items as much as possible before they go into the trash or before giving them away. We live in a society that loves to buy new things, and I'm guilty of it as well, obviously. And I'm not saying never buy new things, but I am saying wherever you can, maybe try to reuse that yogurt container over and over again before throwing it out into the recycling. Because the more that we do that, and the more that you help, the more that I help, the more we can protect animals like sea stars and all the animals in our ocean. This has been another episode of A Spoonful of Species, your go-to place for conservation through baking. If you liked what you saw, like and subscribe. Go check me out on other channels, on my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook. I'm everywhere. You can't get rid of me. I hope to see you next week, and have a great day.